Bring the heart.
It's time to get loud.
Let's go! Because this is Betfred Super League.
Bring it on.
Got me here. It took a big chunk out of me. Bleeding. It's bleeding. Oh no, it's bleeding. The thing just ripped me ear off. What do you think?
Hello once again and welcome along to this week's edition of Eddie and Stevo, the podcast, the best 30 minutes or so of rugby league gossip around, sponsored as always by our great friends at Betfred. Now then, they say a week, or right now 24 hours, is a long time in politics. Well, it's an eternity in rugby league because this week we've got a coach sacking to discuss, a government minister's howler to analyse, and, of course, all the week's news from the Betfred Super League as we approach the magic weekend in Newcastle. Plus, I think it's about time we caught up with all the latest news from Australia's NRL. So let's say hello to Stevo, who's waiting for us in Australia. And Stevo, the land of sunshine and beaches has turned a bit soggy this year. We've seen the pictures on the news of the floods in Sydney that you're all enduring at the moment. I trust, though, that you have kept your head above water.
Only just, Eddie. It's horrific. There's thousands of people having to leave their homes. The rivers are just about to burst. The dams are just about to burst. And we have had rain in Sydney for 8 days solid. And evidently, we'll have about another 4 or 5. And it is just bouncing down. And so many people having to leave their homes. It's horrific. I'll tell you, Eddie, the games on Sunday, I mean, I've never seen this in any of the grounds playing rugby league before in Australia. It was just a quagmire. It reminded me of the old splash final at Wembley. Horrific conditions in Sydney.
Wow. Well, get your brolly up and let's hope everything is going to be all right in the next few days. Right, look, let's move on. The coach's sacking that I talked about right at the start, Tony Smith has been relieved of the duties at Hull Kingston Rovers. Now, no surprise this really, because he made his decision to go in the middle of April. The hierarchy were taken completely unaware as they'd been discussing a new deal with him. They'd won 5 in a row before the announcement. We're in a playoff spot in a Challenge Cup semi-final. So, Tony Smith, gone and not forgotten.
Well, I think a lot of people will understand Tony Smith's point of view. But also, I was surprised, and we've discussed it over the last few weeks, I was surprised that they did not have the guts to say, look, if you're going at the end of the season, then I'm afraid you're going now. I was really stunned by the fact that Hull Kingston Rovers didn't have that guts to just say, well, if you're going, and you're going to go now. We discussed all the time about the timing to give the announcement a week before you're preparing for a semi-final to go to the Challenge Cup final. That's just not on. And we've discussed that. And until my dying day, I can tell you now, I will not be convinced otherwise. He keeps saying that it had no effect on the team, the club, or whatever. Well, ask any Hull Kingston Rovers supporter, and they'll join my band and not his.
Absolutely. They were 80 minutes away from Old Trafford last year. He was there for 3 years all in all. They're saying he's leaving the club in a better position than when he arrived, which I understand. But in the middle of the season, Danny Maguire gets handed a 3-year extension to his contract. He takes over till the end of this year. Willie Peters comes in next year. The place is in turmoil, Stevo.
Yeah, and to be fair, they've also had a bad run of injuries. That is understandable. But I just cannot understand why this didn't happen many, many weeks ago. A clear out is what they need.
Well, they started at the top, and let's see what happens. Danny Maguire has got 10 games to turn things around this year. And, of course, we'll come on to the Magic Weekend in a moment, but they meet Hull FC in the local derby at Newcastle over the weekend. As I say, we'll come on to that in a moment, but I want to talk to you now about the huge gaffe from Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, the Sports Minister, for goodness sake, who last Thursday confused the two rugby codes in a speech at a Rugby League World Cup event in St Helens. Here are the quotes. "I've always quite liked the idea of rugby league," she says. "My long-standing memory is that 2003 drop goal. We were drinking Bloody Marys at the time. Wow, what a moment that was." She's confusing us, Stevo, with the other code. For goodness sake.
Disgraceful. And I wonder how many Bloody Marys she was drinking. Because when you think about it, look, she would have had a script writer. But you've got to double check before you go out into the public, and especially into a rugby league function. I am sick and tired of rugby league being classed as a second-class game. We become second-class citizens. And when someone who is the sports minister comes out with a gaffe like that, it's embarrassing. She tried to turn it around by saying, maybe I changed codes like Robinson.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. We try our damnedest to support and push and get the publicity on what I class as the greatest game of all. And when at the top of the sections, where someone from government comes out with something like that, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to her, but more importantly, it's embarrassing to our game. Disgraceful.
Absolutely right. And when you think also the government is investing £25 million into the World Cup social impact programme into communities across England. I mean, a gaffe like that is absolutely unforgivable.
Well, not only unforgivable, I think we should check on where the money is going to go. Because as far as she's concerned, it's going to rugby union.
Well, it might be. You're right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If she's come down with a gaffe like that, how many of that 25 million will be pumped into rugby union? We won't hear much about that, will we?
No, we won't. I mean, John Dutton, who is the World Cup chief executive, I mean, he did his best to try and make things, as easy as possible for her. And he has said that he's looking forward to her coming to the tournament. I can imagine the sort of response she's going to get at whatever game she turns up to when it gets underway. I was speechless. I was absolutely speechless when I read that report, and I know that you are as well.
It's incredible. And listen, Nadine, I don't know whether you listen to our podcast, but if you do, you have embarrassed rugby league, but more importantly, you've embarrassed the rugby league fans, which is the most important part of our game. Disgraceful.
Matty Pete next. He has lambasted Warrington Wolves for signing and paying for one of Wigan's academy stars, Matty Nicholson. This is his quote. "It would be demoralising working in Warrington's academy. I keep reading about the strength of it, and they're continually paying for our players, Elliot Longstaff, Sam Story, Dean Bedall, and now Matty." Is it such a bad thing that Warrington poach Wigan youngsters if Wigan youngsters, and they have a plethora of them at the DW Stadium, if Wigan youngsters can't get into the first team?
All I can say that this has been going on since 1895 is that we want to become champions. We want to become the best team in our game. So by hook or by crook, it doesn't matter what it is. If we can pinch, poach, call it whatever you want, from another club, it happens down here in Australia. I'm sure it happens in France. It's all about we want to be the best. You can understand them. That's what they want. The fans want it. They don't want to be at the bottom of the table. They want to be getting silverware. And they don't care where their players come from. It's so disappointing. But if the people who run the game allow this to happen, it's impossible to stop. Now, in the early days in Australia, they had a law that said if you had a junior that played in near Parramatta, Blacktown, or Penrith, you could not poach them. Now, that's went out the window about 20 years ago, maybe even longer. In other words, look, I know that Manly, they go out to Blacktown, they go out to Penrith, they have spies or coaches, shall we say, looking for talent. And by hook or by crook, they'll offer them the money, etc. and so forth. But I think it's a bit rich for Wigan to be complaining when the top teams, Wigan, St Helens, Leeds, you can't tell me that they don't poach players. They do, because it's open slather. Nothing you can do about it. Maybe the Rugby Football League should do something about it. I've always said that I'm the president of the Shawcross Boys Club, or should we say the youth club now. And so many of the players are poached by the top clubs. The best players are poached. It's something you can't stop. And I also feel that if they do take a youngster, a young amateur to this, that and the other, I'd like to see a lot more money given to the amateur clubs because it's not sufficient. The amateur clubs, they bring them through from school children, etc., so forth, and then the big clubs take them away. And they really don't pay enough compensation for doing that.
No, that has been a problem with the professional and the amateur game for a long time. This is slightly different in that Matty Pete says that as far as he's concerned, Matty Nicholson had a plan and he has played in Super League this year and his development was, going according to plan. But Darryl Powell has hit back and he has said that it was a bit of a rant from Matty Pete. He said, our academy and the people in it at the moment are absolutely superb. Our scholars have beaten St Helens and our academy beat St Helens the other week. The people running the academy are far from demoralised, but they are embedded in Warrington. You've got to be driven and focused, and all of our coaches and staff are. I don't think it's a great comment from him. That was Darryl Powell's reaction to Matty Pete's comment about all of that. I mean, this is the difference. You're talking about the amateur game and the professional clubs taking the amateur players. This is two Super League clubs vying for the best juniors in the area. And as far as Wigan are concerned, Warrington are poaching theirs.
It's down to the contract. A lot of the young players are not old enough to understand what it's all about in regards to the fact that which club you're going to go to. A lot of influence comes from the parents. And a lot of parents, they'll only look at one thing. Well, I want the best for my son, which is fair enough. So which contract can I get, which is the better one for my son? It's not often that you get people who say, well, I've come through this junior development at my club. I'd like to stay there. I think that is fantastic. But It's the way of the world now, Eddie. Parents want their young lad, young Johnny, to be a superstar, but at the superstar, you've got to pay for it. You've got to give him a good contract. Obviously, Warrington have offered these young kids a better contract than Wigan. So I don't know why anybody should start talking about sour grapes.
No, I can see that. I can see that 100%. And to be fair, we're not talking about multi-million pounds here like they do in the Premier League.
I also add that so many years it's been the top clubs, they'll pick the best amateurs from around the north of England. And in doing so, we talked about the contract. Within that contract, they'll probably have to say that your big money that you can earn is when you've played, say, 10 first-grade games. So they'll buy so many youngsters, and by Jove, when it comes to the fact that they've played 8 or 9 games in the top side, if they don't feel that it can make it any further or is not a long-term investment, they won't pick him again. So maybe half of that contract that mum and dad have done for their son, and it happens, and it has happened over the years, they don't get the bulk of the money. It's a crafty sort of situation, but it goes on.
Yeah, all the big clubs want the best amateurs around, and they want to see how they develop. It is a problem. There's no question about that. Right, look, let's talk about last weekend's matches and what a result for Toulouse. They beat Hull Kingston Rovers, Tony Smith's last game in charge, as it turned out. So Toulouse's red-hot July is underway. Wakefield were beaten by Wigan. Now, they are only 4 points ahead of Toulouse at the bottom of the table. And guess what? Toulouse against Wakefield opens up the magic weekend this coming Saturday in Newcastle. What a match this is going to be.
Yeah, and look, over the years, Eddie, we've had this situation before, but very few fans appear to go for the first game in the stadium. Now, this one has got to be such an attraction that I am appealing to all the fans, not just the fans of Toulouse or Wakefield, is, pack the stadium out, because this is going to be one of the best and toughest games you'll witness over the weekend. Toulouse are fighting for their life. So are Wakefield. It's going to be a cracker of a game. So don't stay in the bars or all around Newcastle. Get yourself into the stadium and watch. Will be as near to sudden death as you can get.
Absolutely, because Wakefield lose, they're in real trouble, because Toulouse have got the next 3 at home, and they showed at the weekend what they can do when they're in the red-hot atmosphere of Toulouse at this time of the year, and they certainly turned Wakefield over. And I think, there will be a decent crowd, because Wigan's win and St Helens' defeat in Perpignan last weekend means there's now just 2 points between those two at the top of the table. And the second game on Saturday is Saints against Wigan. This is the biggest day of the year so far, Stevo, coming up.
Spot on. And I'm glad that the authorities have actually selected a top game and not left it until later in the day. We've seen it so many times, Eddie. How many times did you and I commentate on those particular games? And we were always disappointed by the fact that the crowds never came in. Well, pack them in. I mean, I've always thought that maybe when you buy a ticket, right, you got it at half price if you came in at the start of the game. I know it would be difficult to do, but it's what you could call a full stadium ticket. In other words, you have to get through the barrier to get into the game itself. You've got to be in that stadium at a certain time to get half price. Now that'd fill the stadium.
Yeah, it probably would. You're right. But it's going to be a fantastic week, certainly a fantastic Saturday. It really is. How embarrassing is it going to be, Stevo, for rugby league if we get 10, 15, 20,000 people, it might not even be that many, for the first game between Toulouse and Wakefield for what is an absolutely crucial match for the Super League season?
It is disconcerting to perhaps be opening the first game with just a sprinkling of fans. And we've got to be honest about it. Toulouse won't bring many, will they?
No.
So it's up to, the real rugby league fan. Get in there, get in early. It would be great to see a full stadium, but I doubt it.
No, me too. IMG have got a massive job on their hands moving forward. Good luck to them. Absolutely good luck to them. I hope that it works out for them.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, look, we're on a very, very delicate sort of situation within our game because we don't seem to attract new fans. It's the old faithful. And I'm just fingers crossed that the World Cup is going to be an absolute wonderful exhibition of rugby league football with packed houses. I know they're doing their best. They're coming out with different promotions, etc., and so forth. I just hope that we can attract not the regular, all the regular, but people who just enjoy different sports. And that's what we've got to try to do, is to compete with other sports, is to turn it into an event. From what I can gather, the people who are organising our Rugby League World Cup, I think they're doing a damn fine job. They're trying their damnedest to it. But how much money can they spend in advertising, in offering this for the fans? It's very, very difficult.
Back to last weekend, Huddersfield beaten on Friday by Castleford. Now, you tipped Castleford, I think, as dark horses for the playoffs last week, didn't you? They're now 5th, 2 points clear of Hull, in 6th. They're on the march, Cass.
They are. And I must say, the way that they've got their defence now, that was always Castleford's problem, is that they could play some absolutely fantastic rugby league, and yet they let themselves down with defence. But not anymore. I thought the defence was outstanding. Huddersfield are a top quality side. They were not allowed to take control. The Giants, far too many mistakes, but a lot of people don't realise that when the opposition are having so many mistakes, you've got to give praise for the defence that puts them under that pressure. And that's what Castleford have done. Though it's a bit of sad news that they've lost Jake Truman, Eddie.
It is. It is. He's out for the rest of the season. And what's more, he will be playing for Hull in 2023. That has been confirmed this week, as has the news that Tom Johnston is going from Wakefield to Catalan in 2023. It's that time of the year, Stevo, when, we've talked about this earlier on during the podcast this year. Players are moving. Players are saying they're going to play here, there and everywhere. And, coaches are now planning for the future as well as the season 2022 that still has got a long way to run.
What's all that about? And then they wonder why people won't rush before the season starts to buy a full season ticket, because they're not confident that maybe 2 or 3 of their star players may go to another club. Now, is that the best way to run a sport? We're talking about the fans, Eddie. We're talking about we've got to attract the fans. And yet, they'll announce halfway through Jake Truman, all right, is injured, is going from Cass to Hull Football Club. Now, a young kid and his family spent, I don't know how many pounds, buying a Jake Truman shirt with his name on the back. And he's going. He's leaving.
And I understand what you're saying, but the players, they have the right to make sure that their future is assured. Truman and Johnson have done that. And so, by the way, is Regan Grace at St Helens. He's off to rugby union. He's going to play for Racing 92 from 2023. Now, this is a blow to St Helens, 86 tries and 138 appearances for Regan Grace. And what a blow for Wales in the World Cup. I'm sure John Keir would have been pinning his hopes on Regan Grace. He ain't going to be there.
Yeah. Well, there again, it just adds to what I've just said. Why announce it halfway through the season? It's ridiculous. Look, the journalists are wanting to get a good story, a scoop, as they call them. And they'll try and go underneath and find out this, that, and the other to get that scoop. But it's just open slather. Well, he's going. What does that do for the regular fan? It does nothing. Irritates them.
Leeds, they can't be written off. They crushed Hull away from home. 62-16, Stevo. 5 tries for Ash Handley. They are 9th, but they're only 3 points off a playoff spot. They can't be counted out.
No, I mean, the way they played in the second half, but I must say, the second half display by the Black and Whites was nothing short of disgraceful. I mean, it was as though you talk about putting the cue on the rack. Dear me, I think they ripped the cloth off the table. Never mind just putting the. It was just. It's an amazing thing. I mean, the week before, Wakefield got hammered to such an extent that it was embarrassing.
Let's look at the positives. We've got the Magic Weekend coming up. There are 3 games on Saturday. There are 3 games on Sunday. We've already mentioned the first 2 on Saturday, which are probably the biggest games of the season. And then on the Sunday, Huddersfield, Salford, Catalan against Warrington. Blimey, that's a trial for Warrington after the way they capitulated in the last quarter against Salford at the weekend. And Hull Kingston Rovers against Hull. Now, 9 or 10 players will not be going to Magic because they've been suspended. And, Hull, they're doing their best to try and bolster their defences. They've signed Jack Walker from Leeds on a 2-week loan, as they have with Ellis Longstaff, who we've already mentioned, being poached by Warrington from Wigan, and Josh Sim from St Helens. They're coming in to try and shore up the defences at Hull because Hull, have got 12 players missing for injuries and suspension, and Hull Kingston Rovers aren't much better, and they bring the curtain down on the Magic Weekend. What sort of Magic Weekend do you think we're going to get?
Magic. I really do. Look, the game itself is a little bit undecided, mainly because of the fact you just mentioned so many injuries. Now, I often think to myself, well, if there's so many injuries, is that just bad luck? Or are they being overtrained or undertrained, etc.? It's a question that I don't think anybody can answer. But the clubs will think, well, we've got 12 injured. But is that just bad luck? Is it the way that they're training, etc.? They've got to, all the clubs have got to sort of look at how they've been training, etc., and so forth, how they've been overtrained or undercooked or whatever. But it is a problem. It is a problem for coaches because at the end of the day, it's the coaches that get the sack.
Finally, next week, State of Origin 3. We've talked about State of Origin 1 and 2 at length over the past few weeks. Is it going to be the Blues to win in Queensland, or are the Maroons going to do it, Stevo?
Well, I'm biased. I think New South Wales have the better side. I think they showed that in Origin 2. And I still think that they have the power to do it. But State of Origin 1... they got caught out, did New South Wales, mainly due to the fact that the Queensland forwards just absolutely ransacked the opposition. They've got into it. I think Brad Fittler, the New South Wales coach, has a better side. In fact, he's the only one that's got a selection problem because Jack Whiten will be available. Latrell Mitchell, he played for South Sydney after a long operation. So he's got 2 great players that he may not even select, mainly due to the fact that lack of game time. But Latrell Mitchell was outstanding for Souths, and Jack Whiting he will be available. But Billy Slater, the Queensland coach, he knows that when you look through the list, it's not often that New South Wales win when they've got to play up in Queensland. It's dog eat dog, I'm afraid. That this is going to be a classic. And I do hope that they get a referee that can control it. And talking of Australia, Holbrook, the coach of Gold Coast, he's under pressure. The media is saying that he looks as though he is going to get the chop. And on top of that, Eddie, Christian Wolff is being chased by the 3 clubs in Australia and 1 in New Zealand, which are the Warriors. Bulldogs and Wests are keen to get Christian Wolff away from St. Helens, whose contract is up at the end of this season. But the favourites, according to the media, is that the New Zealand Warriors will offer him a huge contract. And let's face it, he's done a good job at St. Helens.
Well, he has, but so too did Justin Holbrook. So too did Michael Maguire at Wigan. So too did Nathan Brown when he was over here. And they are all out of, or being tipped to be, out of a job in the NRL in the foreseeable future. I mean, why would Christian Wolff walk away from St. Helens? I know he's an Australian, but why would he walk away from St. Helens with the team playing so well, top of the table, probably on for 4 grand final wins in a row? Why would he go from Saints to New Zealand? Come on.
Money. Let's not mess around here and say, oh, they'll give him a 3-bedroom apartment overlooking Auckland Harbour or something like that. That may be part of the contract. I don't know. But one word, money. Can't blame him.
No, you can't. Well, wouldn't Eamon McManus, Mike Rush, wouldn't they move heaven and earth to keep? Mind you, I was going to say to keep him, but, you know, Daniel Anderson, Justin Holbrook, Christian Wolff, the story at St. Helens just goes on and on. They seem to unearth great coaches, great players, each and every year.
It's difficult. And it appears that, you know, St. Helens is a club, and Wigan, that have had to suffer.
Maybe we will delay the podcast next week and take in your State of Origin reflections once SO03 is done and dusted. How about that? We'll leave it maybe for 24 hours next week. What do you think?
Good. Yeah, that sounds good for me, because I'll be enthralled by whatever happens. I live in New South Wales, so I want the Blues to win. As simple as that. And as I mentioned last week, it's a sellout.
And will you be amongst them?
In this weather, I'm staying at home.
Yeah, last week you were going to get on the plane and go up and support the Blues. This week you're staying at home because it's raining. For goodness sake.
I can't afford an umbrella, Eddie. It's as simple as that. It's listen. I live at the top of the hill, but I'm still frightened. I might get flooded.
You never know.
Because the wind is so strong. I have a lot of trees that surround our area, and I'm frightened to death that one of the large ones might come crashing through the house.
Oh, no, don't say that. Don't say that. I'm sure it won't. They will miss you out. There's no question about that. When the wind blows in Sydney, it doesn't go anywhere near the Stevo mansion. Don't worry about that.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll send you a photo. It is bouncing down.
Well, look, you stay dry, you stay safe, and next week we'll talk State of Origin, and we will reflect the Magic Weekend as well. So talk to you in 7 days' time.
Take care, top man.